Welcome to the Masters of Today and Tomorrow, MTT, a podcast focused on spreading valuable frameworks and ideas from the Masters of Today to help you become one of the Masters of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Kevin Liu, an aspiring 16-year-old entrepreneur, developer, and modern-day polymath. Today, we'll be having a legendary guest on the show, Rick Neuman, the current Chief Product and Technology Officer at Flipp, a company focused on helping families by making their lives more affordable. Prior to being at Flipp, Rick has also held several leadership roles at both Walmart and Sears as Vice President of International Strategy and Tech. Rick has also obtained a Bachelor's of Commerce at McMaster's University and an MBA from York University's Schulich School of Business. Today, we'll be touching upon a variety of topics surrounding business, tech, retail, and leadership. Let's kick it off with a blast. Hey Rick, glad to have you on the show. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're working on actually right now.
Fantastic. Always happy to chat about what I'm working on. Less excited to chat about myself, but I'll do it in the sake of full transparency. So my name is Rick Neuman. I am the Chief Product and Technology Officer for a company called Flipp. We're a Toronto-based startup that's actually about 10 years old, and we're trying to solve the problem of helping families to save money to make their life more affordable. We do that by sharing savings and deals, coupons, flyers, etc. on a mobile app. Please go download it. We'd love to have you as a user. And then in my spare time, I'm the father of 3 young girls, a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And I don't know that anyone has time for much more than those 2 things alone.
Absolutely, completely understand that. And that actually funnels into the next question, right? So in the light of that, how do you actually maintain that work-life balance? And what does your day typically look like, essentially?
Well, the great part about being in product management and technology is no day is ever the same. Because things change so quickly, strategies change, customer behaviors change. So the key is staying on top of that. So a typical day for me mostly involves people management, working with my team to understand what's in their way, how I can help knock down those barriers, how I can help provide more focus and clarity on what we think is the most important thing to do in connection with our strategy. And then learning as much as I possibly can about the customer. I try and join as many sales calls as I possibly can with retailers, and I try and listen in on all the different sessions that we do with real customers in market, so I can get a real sense of what's going on, and then read as much as humanly possible.
That's awesome. And something that was really interesting to me is that initially you went to school formally for business. You were initially obtaining a BCom from McMaster's and then later an MBA from Schulich. Now, you spoke last time about this as well, but I'm curious as to how you approached learning about the technical aspect and how that actually led into senior leadership roles in tech and strategy. And then as well on top of that, how do you actually continue to learn in order to keep up with the emerging world and the fast pace of tech?
Yeah, great questions. And sometimes I'm a little confused about the answer to that myself in terms of how, as a business student, I am now leading technology and have been. So I am the CTO for a technology company. And before that, I was the CTO for Walmart Canada and played a pivotal role on the Walmart International Technology team. And I pinch myself every day because, one, it's like super fun to be in technology. So that alone has been amazing. But pure credential wise, I just don't have it. And I get that. The key for me is, one, I'm a computer geek by upbringing, have been my whole life. I don't have the piece of paper to prove it, but it's definitely been a passion. And while I've never coded professionally, it is a hobby that has been there from the start all the way through high school and beyond. And so I continue to hold my nerd cred up, and I hope that I get a passing grade in most cases. But that aside, just being in technology, I think as you progress through leadership, knowing how to do some of the specific skills, knowing how to code in any particular language or knowing how to be a data scientist becomes less and less important. And the traditional leadership capabilities become more and more important, though with an extra dose of believing that you can solve problems through technology and being adamant that you try and continue to learn more around how your team is truly operating and what their needs are and what motivates those people on your team. So I think through that, I've been able to find success in a technology world despite not having the formal education. And it's mostly about just hiring people way smarter than me to solve the big problems.
Yeah, it just goes to show how that piece of paper really doesn't matter at the end of the day. And as long as you're truly passionate about what you're doing, and as well, you're just really interested in whichever field you're going deep in, that really just at the end of Flipp and also the other companies you've been part of?
Yeah, I think my approach is definitely to focus on understanding the problem we're trying to solve when you're structuring a team, and then stepping back and thinking deeply around what types of skills do you need to go solve it. And I know we just a minute ago said that maybe the piece of paper matters less, but in many cases, the skills that you're looking for are people who have honed a particular craft beyond what you yourself can do. And so if I was only trying to build teams of people who looked like and behaved like and thought like me, we wouldn't get anywhere. I'm not nearly as skilled as a lot of the people on my team. But what I can do is help break down problems and understand, all right, for this problem, I think I need a little bit more front-end design work, a little more, iOS dev, some back-end work, and a whole lot of content management and data engineering. So let's structure a team like this and then look for the personalities with the right skills to go throw at this problem. And then pull those people together, articulate the problem well, and then have them each understand what their role is on the team. Like, you never watch one of those heist movies where everybody's got the exact same skills, right? You've got the demo expert, you've got the one who can pick locks. You need all skills, and you need those skills well honed. And then you need someone who knows how to pull the team together and give them that mission. So that's what I try to do for my teams.
That's awesome. That's super inspiring. And it just goes to show as well, like how that believing in your team really allows you to then leverage the intelligence and really bring the best of the best together. So let's actually touch upon, like, as a leader, what are some of the biggest mistakes and lessons you've learned from them? Because we've all had like those setbacks, but like once you learn from them, it's super valuable.
So some of the biggest mistakes are going to seem a little strange. The ones that come to mind, the first one is understand that it's not just building a thing, but you've got to run the thing too. And there's an example from my days at Walmart. We built a gift registry program. We built the technology that powered the ability to add things to your list and send it to your friends, and then they could buy stuff and it would come off your list for weddings and baby showers and the like. And it was pretty cool tech, pretty decent experience. But unfortunately, we didn't put as much thought into how we were going to run this as a program. And in order for something like that to work, you need to operate it. You need to tell people who are about to have a baby that they can use this service, so that they go and they build it up and they think about you. And unfortunately, the audience of that changes all the time. So you've got to continually be out in market and building that audience. It's not if you build it, they will come. And I think a lesson learned there is, if you're not putting as much thought into what happens after you've built it, then certainly whatever product or service or thing you're trying to put out into the world is not going to work as well as you had hoped. And that was the case for Walmart and gift registry, at least a couple of years back. The second one that I would say is, when it comes to building teams, if the fit isn't right, you need to move as fast as possible and be as clear as possible with the individuals that it's not right, and make changes. And that might mean moving people to different teams in order to find a better fit, or it might mean being clear that unfortunately right now, some skills aren't needed in the same way and you need to change the dynamic of the team. And so some people might not be part of it anymore, and you have to be okay with that. And it's actually better for the individual and better for your team if you move as fast as you can in those cases. So hire fast, and in some cases fire fast if the fit's just not there. And I think that's a mistake that many early managers make, in believing that they can solve problems, by putting in extra effort on themselves, or, just wait and see approach and hope things get better. But unfortunately, there are some problems that don't get better with age, and having the right team is so impactful to the success of your business. And that's one of the mistakes that I definitely learned from, and am still learning from every day.
Absolutely. That's super inspiring and mind blowing, because what I've realized as well is that when you don't really have a good sense of what the end user wants and how to actually directly target them, you end up not being able to have much success, even if you've built this amazing product and that in your mind as a team that you think it's going to crush it, right? So then, as someone that leads product and strategy among your various previous roles, how do you actually ask those right questions, and how do you get the answers that you need from that?
That's a great question. And I don't know if we get it perfect every time. I mean, I'm still running into product failures. And I will be running into product failures, for the foreseeable future, because I don't know that anyone ever gets this right. You ask the questions that you believe are going to get you closer to the answer up front. And ideally, you're working with like a great customer research team who can help you shape those answers to get results that you can believe in, so that none of your biases kind of bleed into the answers that you get. And then ideally, you don't just listen to what customers say they're going to do, but you put something in market as quick as possible so you can see what customers actually do, because behavior is way more powerful than words and will be much more telling about future behavior than any form of prediction that your spreadsheets can tell you. And so to me, those are the only ways. And ideally, when you see that, you know what, the customer said they were going to do something, but really it's not happening, it's not coming out in the data, you have to make choices. You have to decide, do I continue to, pound against this problem? Or is there another way to look at it that can get me there faster or can approach the problem in a different way? And you hear the term pivot all the time, right? And ultimately, that's what we're talking about here. It's you try your best bet. You have conviction in ideally the direction that you're going in, but you can't fall in love with your solution too much. You have to be ready to change.
Absolutely, that makes a ton of sense, because what I've realized as well is that in some of, I guess, some of the early ideas or solutions that I've ended up working on in terms of previous consulting challenges or other presentations that I've been putting together, at the beginning, you end up trying to settle for one of the solutions, and sometimes it actually doesn't work out or it doesn't make the most sense, and you just fall in love with that, right? And you try to carry through, and you have your own bias, and the lens that you go with that really clouds the judgment that you're able to have, and you're really able to move forward and try to make the best possible solution. And I completely resound with that, right? So when you're trying to narrow it down, how do you determine who you want to specifically target, and how do you approach that market research and validation? Because that's definitely one of the, I guess, more complex areas of focus that or problems that you can tackle.
Yeah, it depends on the problem and the strategy that you're trying to take. I think how do you choose a target audience is a lot of like the upper level strategy work that you need to do by starting with all right, what's the total addressable market in the space that you're trying to focus on? And then how much of that do you think you could capture, and to what degree of value? And is there a niche audience that is disproportionately more valuable that maybe would be easier to capture? And so maybe you should set your target in a much more focused approach, but set your price much higher because you can serve their needs differently. It's really about strategy, and there's no like specific way to say you should focus on this audience for this reason, unless you start with what is your problem, like what is the unique observation that you're trying to solve against, and then who has that problem and how many of those people are there, and what would they be willing to pay you if you solved it, or how can you extract value in some way. There's too many variables to give you a strict answer, but at the end of the day, what I would recommend is go and take some actual like strategy courses to look at the different frameworks on how to break problems down. That is the most important skill in defining who your target audience is going to be.
That's awesome. And I think that directly correlates with, for example, Sears is a great example. And I know you actually spent some time there as well, right? And
Mhm.
as we all know, they no longer exist really. And what do you think were some of the core underlying factors of that? And what are some of the lessons that we can learn from like a strategy perspective or a tech standpoint on what we can learn when we're building products or even companies?
Yeah, I remember the day that I was deciding to not work at Sears anymore. Was the day one of my senior leaders looked me in the eye when I asked them the question of who is our target market. And to be clear, I asked this question because it was very obvious that Sears had two main business lines: its stores and its catalog business, and they had different teams that ran them. And it was clear that within those two businesses, they were targeting a completely different customer set. And then even beyond that, different categories were targeting different customer sets. Some were focused on, younger adults who were entering the workforce, and others were focused on more mature adults who were perhaps later stages in life. But it meant that if you were in the beauty section, you might be targeting one customer. And if you were in apparel, you were targeting a different customer. And if you were in major appliances, you were targeting yet another customer. And so I asked the senior vice president, who is our target customer? And why are we so spread out? And he looked me dead in the eyes and he said, well, Rick, our target customer is people with wallets. And I knew that it was time to leave Sears, that a lack of focus, a lack of clarity was going to lead to the wrong outcomes as an organization. And that, the most senior leadership wasn't able to identify what we wanted to stand for as a company. And it could only lead to one direction. And ultimately that is like where it landed. Now, I'm not claiming to be prescient by any means. Sears was already struggling at the time, and it's not like that one insight led me to understand the future 15 years out. But it was definitely a telling moment of how we had gotten ourselves into that position and why it was time to work for a company with greater focus.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So Sears was essentially a department store, right? But how does that actually differ from Walmart's approach? And how did Walmart specifically find success while they were also targeting a bunch of different sectors, or they were also targeting a bunch of different departments as well through their various initiatives? For example, they were also expanding their, for example, grocery business or their grocery pickup service, for example.
Yeah, and I'm not going to claim that Walmart is immune to that same phenomenon of like being excited about targeting something different in order to grow your pie in the short term, but ultimately confuse your strategy. But I think the strategic intent of Walmart is such a well honed machine, and it's at its core very clear about its strategy, which ultimately then filters to all categories, all formats, and all different lines of business that you bring to market. And that strategy is save money, live better. So help customers to save money so that they can do more and be more with their lives and invest that back in, the things that every family needs. And through that strategy, then you look at like all the different cascading decisions that have to be made. And it ultimately leads you to, well, if you're going to save money, if you're going to have the lowest price, you have to have a cost structure that enables it, which means you need to make all of these choices on the cost side so that you can survive off a much thinner margin than other merchants can. And in order to do that, then you have to have products that really, really speak to a customer who needs that, who needs kind of a certain level of price and brand affinity and so on. And so I just think the strategy was much sharper, and then it allows them to build more trust with customers over the long term. Not with everyone, not everybody loves Walmart, but the customers who do love it enough that has turned it into the largest company in the world.
Damn, that's super amazing. And that's actually really insightful. The idea that they really ensured that they had the clarity, they had their vision, they had their purpose, and really strive to just move forward and essentially try to help people save money and live better, which is also similar to how Flipp structures their mission, right? Their mission is also the idea of trying to help consumers try to live affordably and also find the deals that they can to make sure that they're also getting through, for example, even tough times, right? And I think this also ties into something I remember hearing from Peter Thiel about how competition is for losers, right? And when you're leading the strategy aspect of things, how do you differentiate the products that you create and become the first choice for consumers when they're looking at, for example, Flipp, among many other different apps that they can use?
I mean, the most important thing is understanding their needs, the missions and journeys that they're on, and how you can make those things better and more compelling for them. And so, for us, it's looking at what is the best way to help someone live more affordably. And the way that we define it is trying to be the number one distribution platform for savings and deal content so that a customer can make the best, most informed choice on where to shop so that they can save the most money. And then everything that we look at is, are we helping them to do that? So, are we providing tools and capabilities that allow them to make planning easier as they're kind of looking at where they should go shop? Are we helping them to understand who has the best deals, which means we're constantly scraping the market to see what forms are savings and deals taking and where do they exist? And if they are not coming in the forms that we already have, to be clear, like we're really strong in flyers and coupons and online deals, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have all of the savings and deals. So we're constantly looking at the comprehensiveness of our content and making sure that we've got the right content coming in so that, regardless of the experience we have, if you don't have the deals, you're not helping people save money. And that's really what we think about. And so, we're focused on the categories that are going to have the biggest impact. So the way that we've defined it in our strategy is, what is the largest share of wallet for a household, and what is the highest frequency of purchase? Because if we can help you save money on those things, we're going to help you put more money back in your budget overall. So it helps us then focus in on things like grocery and pharmacy and housewares, the things that you buy all of the time. And when you actually look, I don't know if you've kind of mapped out your own personal budget, but when you do, if you're a homeowner, you'll see that those lines are some of the largest ones you have on your monthly budget. And especially when you're like me and you've got 3 kids at home, you can't believe how much money you spend at the grocery store on a weekly basis. And if only you could save a fraction of that, it would be super meaningful. And when I say meaningful, like, we've done research that users of Flipp can save over $45 per week by using Flipp regularly. And you do the math, and that's over like $2,000 a year. That's, a home renovation in some cases. That's sending your kids to camp. That's a vacation as a family. That's meaningful. And, you look at the opportunity of, the households that need this across Canada and the United States, the financial impact that Flipp can have if more people use it regularly is bigger than the stimulus package they just passed in Congress. And so I'm super excited about the opportunity that we have to really change the dynamic of how people save money across North America.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it's actually super relevant to the times that we're in right now, right? Because when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, a lot of small businesses and families, myself included, right, got hit really hard. And on various fronts, for example, either that be physically, mentally, or even financially, particularly, right? So
Mhm.
what was the transition like for you? And did anything change in what you did with Flipp? Or what were the shifts in strategy that took place? And then how did you adapt with that as well?
Yeah, I mean, things had to change. It was obvious, and there's changes that happened to the industry that we reacted to, and there's just like changes that happened psychologically that we had to react to. And the very first thing that we did, I mean, this was back in like late February, early March, when things were just starting to ramp up and a lockdown was just starting to happen, is we gave our entire technology team a, like, I think it was 3 week, 2 week to 3 week hackathon to say, guys, we know you want to help. We know that the world is changing. Let's figure out what we can do from where we stand to make life better for shoppers. Just go put all of your energy towards that. And I think that was pretty meaningful. I mean, there's only so much that an app like ours can do in a situation like that. But just knowing that we are willing to do whatever it takes in order to make a difference was meaningful to me, at least. And so some of the things that came out of that were, putting more content up to help people know which stores were open or not open. We created an outreach program that allowed charities to create space for free in our app. And we gave away space that would have otherwise been valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars, so that they could reach people to know how to donate to, fight hunger and fight poverty and, help those who were affected most dramatically. And I think that as a first step was really, really good. But in terms of what changed in the industry, those first couple of weeks of COVID were really tough for people like us, because we are trying to help merchants connect with shoppers. And, that's really the role that we play. But for those first few weeks when the shelves were effectively bare and everyone thought the apocalypse was coming, no merchants were trying to market. Why would you market if you didn't know it could be on the shelf? And so, our ability to influence and help shoppers save money dropped off dramatically for a few weeks. But again, the world changes in interesting ways, and the dynamic of savings shifted significantly more to digital for a couple of reasons. One is that people didn't want to engage with physical content, print flyers, print coupons, etc., because touching things and handing things to people was a vector of risk. So that declined dramatically. And then at the same time, the activity moved digital far, far faster. So online grocery and online decision making became far more prevalent for more people. And we're super relevant in that space. And so what turned into a couple of weeks of, of risk and fear, uncertainty, and doubt then turned into the rest of the year of massive opportunity and us being able to help merchants and help shoppers in ways that we had never been able to before. And so then it was more like, okay, where is this going next? And how do we get ahead of it? And that's what we've been working on since.
Yeah, that's insane. And the impact that you've had with all of the shifts and pivots that you've probably implemented and the hackathon that you enforced upon everybody to really hunker down and try to ensure that, hey, how can we make sure that we provide the most impact and help others during this time of need was super inspiring, right? And COVID-19 also radically shifted this whole retail space, and that transition towards e-commerce specifically was
Mhm.
exponentially accelerated, right? Due to the various concerns about in-store shopping, among many other factors. So what, in your mind, what does the future of retail look like to you, and how will physical locations along like brick and mortar stores stay alive given how they were already struggling pre-COVID and pre-lockdowns?
Yeah, and I mean, there have been struggles in parts of retail, but I wouldn't say that it was necessarily because of the physical space. I think that a good combination of digital and physical is by far the best combination. And the reality is, I think physical retail is going to play a role in the way that we operate our lives for a very, very long time. But the dynamics are going to change, and they already had been changing. I think COVID just accelerated us a number of years forward on the direction that we were already heading in, which is that digital convenience is incredibly powerful, and that the ability to place your order and then drive over and pick it up in real time is something that is game changing to how things work. Now, when it actually gets delivered to you, it can be even better, and in many cases, that's where the world has gone now. But we have to realize that all of that convenience comes at a cost, and I'm not sure that everyone is ready or willing to pay that cost. And so, I do think that the physical locations, both from a time perspective, if you want it delivered and delivered fast, it's got to be somewhere close to you, and from a cost perspective, if you want to maintain the ability to enjoy lower prices, then unfortunately, the kind of nth degree of convenience is not necessarily what's going to keep prices low. So it does mean that physical locations are going to be important for both of those reasons.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I see. And speaking about the hackathon, actually, I'm
Mm,
curious about what was the process that went on behind the scenes between having those new ideas
mhm.
and delivering those ideas as final products. What was the gap between, what was the delta between those having those ideas and then actually having them materialize as final solutions?
Yeah, so there was a brainstorming portion, and then we had championed someone who would lead the hackathon to help guide, which ideas did we think could be achieved inside the time frame that we were allocating, and then which ones might go into our backlog and roadmap for longer term, consideration and so on. I think we netted it out to 6 or 7 ideas that we would pursue in that period of time, of which 5 or 6 of them actually made it to production, which is a pretty good hit rate for a hackathon. Now, this is a fairly long. Normally, our hackathons are like 3 days, so having a 2+ week hackathon was a unique scenario. But honestly, the biggest impact that we had was really, I think, on the dynamic with the team and giving people an opportunity to be a part of the solution, and not sit idly by. When you've got a team of like really passionate, high energy, highly intelligent engineers and business development people and researchers and marketers, et cetera, all together, nobody wants to sit by and watch the world go by. And so, I think just the engagement side was worth it. And that's one of the big things that a lot of companies had to grapple with is how do you help your team through this? Because it's really hard. It's really hard to suddenly change your whole way of life. Many of us had children crawling on us all hours of the day, as we tried to continue to stay focused on our jobs. And all of this change at once was, really, really challenging on a lot of people's psyche. So anything you can do to ease the burden and bring more cohesiveness to the team was really important over the last year. And, the hackathon was one method to do that, but just the way that we changed how we communicated, got more transparent, focused our strategy, all of those were efforts towards the same.
Absolutely. That's super important, right? Especially during a time of turmoil and uncertainty. That's really valuable from like a leader perspective to like really make sure their team's doing well, things are moving forward. When you're working with others on your team, what do you think are the core values and mindsets that you would look for? And then in your mind, like what's the ideal team culture? And through that, how did you end up also making sure that you supported them during the times that were rough in the past year or so during these new times, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, the Flipp culture resonates with me a lot, and so I've only been at the company for a year, but it already feels completely natural. And the cornerstones of the Flipp culture are people who are humble, as in they don't believe that they are the solution or that they, can move mountains on their own, that we really work as a team. They're hungry and they want to see big changes in the world and in the way that we operate. They're highly intelligent because it really is complex problems that we're trying to solve for, and we want the best who are really going to put their full brain behind some of the problems that we're solving. And they're other centered, and we really talk about how we operate best as one team, and we want people who are actively looking out for the best interests of everybody else, knowing then that if they do that and if everybody else is looking out for their best interests, that everybody wins. And so that as a culture really resonates with me. Those four things in combination can lead to just incredible results.
Last time when I actually heard of that Flipp culture and what you guys stand for, I think I also really resonated with that, because those three core values really makes you think of the core, I guess, in a way, metrics or requirements that you might have in terms of driving your team forward and having just broad success in whatever you're doing, right? And I was actually also curious on how you stay humble actually as well, because as humans we just like normally we have our own egos, we have our own biases, we have our own beliefs and whatnot. So what have you done specifically, and like what have you learned through the whole process on like making sure that like we're able to be as transparent as possible and also just like stay rooted and humble?
The best way to stay humble is go have some children. They will very quickly teach you that no matter what your job title, no matter what your station in life, it doesn't matter, and they're going to walk all over you until you set the right, boundaries and you build mutual respect. Because you can't like win with a 3-year-old. They have to like want to love you, and I think that's the best way to stay humble is go have a couple of children, and you'll really see the world from a different angle. But I think like the other key there is, you know, and I don't know if there's a way to like build humility. I think it's something that like you learn along the way. And if you can surround yourself with people who you respect way beyond the skills that you believe you bring to the table, and again, build that diversity of a team where people have different ideas and different upbringings and different, ways of looking at problems, and you can see just how much value they add. I see no other outcome than to be humble. Now, I know that's not always the case, and I did work at some companies where humility was not a feature that was widely sought after. Um, but in the case of what I see right now at Flipp, and even at Walmart before me, the Walmart slogan was always, ordinary people doing extraordinary work. I heard that many, many times, and it really resonated. Where we're all just human. We all have our problems. Everyone's got something that they have to deal with at home in a different way. But you put that aside and you really focus on the impact you can have on the world. And it's pretty cool what comes out the other side.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess another question that really links to that, right? What are some of the frameworks that you use to think through some of the challenges you face actually on like day-to-day basis, or even in your personal life, that you just have been picking up on, or some of the recent changes that you've implemented as well?
What are some of the frameworks that I use? That's a great question. I mean, if you've gone to MBA, you have a number of strategic frameworks that you keep in the back of your mind at all time, from Porter's 5 forces to SWOT analyses to all sorts of business frameworks that are important and that I do use on a regular basis. But I think the most important framework from a product management perspective, when I'm trying to build products or when I'm trying to build product teams, I look at 4 different elements of how to spend my time and how to kind of put things into balance that I think is incredibly important and that I talk to my team about regularly. So I'll probably reference that right now. And those things are listen, vision, deliver, trust. 4 pieces to product management that need to be in almost perfect balance at all times. So let me explain. Listen is truly understanding your customer, understanding your strategy, understanding the market, listening to all the data and insights, and actively learning and forming opinions based on real data and trends, and staying grounded in what's happening in the world beyond you. And if you don't do that, you can very easily lose the lead of how to solve a problem. Vision is then applying all of that understanding in a way that's going to cut through and show a path to a brighter future. So if you're trying to solve a problem, how do you intend to solve it? What is the best solution that you can do? And how do you inspire people to come and join you to go and solve that problem? How do you inspire investors to give you money? How do you inspire a team to sign up? How do you paint the picture and then break it down into, enough proof points that they believe, okay, we can do this. Deliver is putting in place the structure and the formality and the rigor to actually do it and ship it. So that's whatever agile processes you have, actually building the team, writing the stories and getting into the details of how are you actually going to bring whatever it is you're trying to do to life. And then the trust piece, the last piece, is incredibly important, because if you're not building trust with all of those stakeholders along the way, with your customers and the core leadership of your company from a strategy perspective, with whoever's invested in your product and your growth, and with your delivery team, you're going to stall out if not each of those stakeholders believes in and trusts. So a ton of that is just communicate, constantly, aggressively. Be prepared to repeat the same thing over and over and over again to build trust.
Absolutely. Dang, that was super insightful. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's like definitely something that I'm probably going to carry forward in like different projects that I end up being a part of, and just like thinking through from even just like as the lens from the product management perspective, even if it's just like if I'm contributing to the team or whatnot, because that process and that framework you think through when you're trying to deliver an excellent product while also maintaining the different relationships and whatnot, that really resounds with me, because then you would also be playing that delicate balance. Wow. It's awesome. Cool. Okay. So as well, I also remember a super inspiring quote and empowering one as well that you said last time we spoke. And it was the idea of learning the rules like a master so you can break them like an artist. And that really blew my mind. So do you want to actually like talk a little bit more about that and like share your thoughts on that specifically?
Sure. And to be clear, I steal a lot of my quotes from other smarter people. So I don't actually recall who to attribute that quote to properly. But yeah, the concept of learning the rules like a master so you can break them like an artist is always really inspiring to me. It's around how do you know the game or know what you're doing well enough that you can throw the rules away and still find a way to be successful. And it's just so critical in every case. And I mean, I even reflect on that now in the world that I'm in, where we're trying to help people save money, make life more affordable, and bring them savings and deals to help them plan where to shop. So we know the dynamics. We know that how a CPG partners with a retailer to create trade agreements to set prices and do temporary price reductions, and how those deals turn into flyers and coupons, et cetera. But we're constantly then looking at what is the next opportunity to help people save? How do we learn more about this environment in order to help people find a better path through it and support, the dynamic with the merchants even better? And that might mean breaking some of the traditional rules. And we're not the only ones that are doing that. You look at, a lot of the different industry players who are looking at paths through this to help people save. There's a whole host of rebate companies that are looking to provide cash back on how transactions happen. There's companies that are looking at how do you create post transaction rebates where you scan your receipt and money gets applied back to you that's funded by the CPGs. And it's breaking the traditional rules, but in a way that's really going to help people save money. So how then do we show people those opportunities, all those opportunities, and help the rule breakers and help things kind of change and evolve? And I don't know what the right answer is, but that's the whole point. It's if you know the rules like a master, you can then break them like an artist. And I think that's really important for everybody.
That's amazing. And I guess then from that perspective, the goal essentially is to learn and to really ensure that we optimize for growth. So like my question directly leading into that is how do we optimize for that growth, and what are the approaches that we can take to, again, learn the rules like a master and then really make sure that we can break them like an artist.
Have you read Gladwell's book on the 10,000 hours?
Yeah, the idea of just like the 10,000 hours and really ensuring that you like hone your craft and get good at it and like spend that time and invest and constantly practice and practice and practice to get to the point where you can end up just being really good at what you do. That's part of it as well, right?
So I would say that that's how you become a master. How you decide to break the rules and become an artist is something that's more personal and demands a certain level of grit, a certain level of creativity, and an environment that is willing to take risks and take chances. And some of that is you or the individual, and some of that is the environment, some of which you can control and some of which you can't, but you can always put yourself in a different environment as well. But I think that that's the key, is once you have all those skills and once you've built all that credibility and knowledge, you can't just sit on it and maintain the status quo. Defending the status quo is practically impossible. If you're going to not be able to defend the status quo, you may as well be the one who's breaking the status quo. It's a far better position to be in.
Absolutely. That sounds awesome. And like that's something that we should really make sure that we think about, like ingrain ourselves like all the time, no matter what we're doing. And knowing that we need to learn and how to learn is like part of the puzzle. But how do we know what to learn? So what do you think are some of the most valuable things in life as well? And on top of that, like a separate question as well, building on top of that, what are some of the most valuable skills to develop, either soft skills or technical skills or anything that comes to mind?
I mean, if you're going to talk valuable skills, there's too many to discuss, and it's an impossible question to answer. I think the universal skills that kind of bubble to the top are communication skills and empathy skills. If I had to pick two, I would pick those two. Communication, because I already said that trust building is critical no matter what you're doing, and I fundamentally believe that the better you are at communicating what's on your mind, how you're feeling, and all of the insights that you have, the more likely you are to be able to make an impact, because the biggest problems in the world demand more than one person solving them. And unfortunately, we don't read minds and we can't immediately just transfer information between us. If you can go solve that problem, maybe communication would become less critical. But until that day, we have to share ideas, and then we have to decide which idea to go and chase, and how to pursue it and what that means. And you would be shocked how quickly people interpret things differently and how frequently you have to communicate and communicate and communicate. And then empathy, or even like emotional intelligence, is just the reinforcement of that, because it's not enough to just say something and assume that like it's going to happen or that people believe it. You have to be able to put yourself in the position of the audience you're trying to communicate with, to know how they're going to react and make sure that you're tailoring the message to get the right reaction that you need. But at the same time, you also need to understand where they're coming from and hear what they're saying and be willing to change your position by being empathetic, so that you actually learn and you're not just hearing to respond, but you're hearing to debate. So I'd say that empathy is the next most important thing to go with it.
Absolutely. And just speaking from personal experience as well, right? I guess the worst, I would say, failures in any projects or any even just broken relationships or whatnot, or even disputes, it's all usually attributed to that lack of communication or that lack of trust or that lack of understanding and mutual empathy, right? So really ensuring that we get that right. At the moment, we probably don't have any solutions. Maybe BCIs might help and stuff like that. But until then, yeah, that's definitely something that we have to work through and just like constantly build that skill of communication, right? And I think tying into that, there's this assumption, I think, among many people that to be a leader or to be someone that's like in a position of power to get things done, that we might even have to be borderline mean or make sure that we're just potentially even offensive, which I don't particularly agree with, right? But I think as well, like what you said last time really resonated. But do you want to touch about like your thoughts on that and like what it means to also like tie into that and be like a great leader in that sense?
Yeah, I fundamentally disagree that to be a strong leader, you have to be an asshole. Yeah, I don't believe that that's true at all. If you're going to be humble, then it means you've got to be yourself. You've got to be you, and you've got to, you have to be willing to be direct. You also can't be a pushover. And, to be a great leader isn't just to coddle someone. If I gave my kid what she asked for every day, she's not going to grow up to be a productive, successful, happy and engaged adult, she's going to have a lot of really terrible habits, and I will have empowered that by not being what she needed as a parent. And it's silly to think that leadership is very similar to parenting, but in a lot of ways it is. So there's a lot of lessons that you can take from that, and it's the same with your team. You don't need to be mean, you don't need to be overly aggressive, but you need to be clear and direct, and you need to give people honest and actionable feedback that helps them to get better. And if they're not getting better, then you have to make sure they're in an environment where they can go and be fully successful and make a change. I mean, we talked about that earlier, but it's not, the nice thing to do isn't just to keep somebody around because you're too afraid as a leader to do something about it. The nice thing to do is to be really clear on what the person's skills are, strengths, and get them an environment where they can find success and be their full selves as well. So I think there's a misconception that being clear about what the needs of your team are, and then pushing for the goals that you're trying to achieve, and trying to push on stretch and helping people grow might be mean. But I don't consider that mean. I actually consider that being very, very nice to a team. And at the same time, there's a misconception that you have to yell and scream at people and raise your voice and, throw fits and, assert dominance in different ways. And I fundamentally disagree with that. If that was the recipe for success, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. That's just not my personality.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that as well, right? Radical honesty is something that's really hard to give because it feels bad. Like it potentially you feel like you could ruin relationships and whatnot, but it also is sometimes a harder pill to take. But in the bigger picture, it is the right thing, and I guess objectively nice thing to be doing for the other person, because then they can realize that this is what I probably needed here, and thank you so much for giving that information to me. Now I can do something about that and take action, right? So yeah, I think I was curious as well. You mentioned parenting is also very similar to leadership. So, what are some of the core principles or lessons or setbacks that you've learned throughout the many years of being a parent and a father as well?
So you're going to mess up your first. I know that we did, in the most positive way possible. She's lovely. But we made so many mistakes that we look back on and kick ourselves for. And then you learn from your mistakes. So to me, that's one of the greatest lessons of parenting that you can apply in leadership as well, is, look back at what you've done and don't, lose heart. It's salvageable, but learn from it. You've got to, take what you've seen and the results that you've had and try something different and see if the results get better. So I think that's definitely one of the lessons. At the same time, parenting is, it's full of its rewards, as challenging as it is. And it's the same with a team. When you can kind of push through and find that connection with your team, it can be incredibly rewarding and lead to some lasting friendships and love that, stretch for a long, long time. And I think that's an important lesson as well, is that you get out what you put in. So be prepared to put a lot of yourself into your team, and you'll get a lot out of it.
Absolutely. And as well, I think that also ties into the idea of anti-fragility, not letting those, I guess, setbacks or mistakes or failures just really push you down, and instead learning from them and getting right back up, right? And this is something that was really heavy in the book Principles by Ray Dalio, which I recently come across. And that was super impactful as well, to learn that instead of just letting those setbacks take you down, just making sure that you can take that and use that to propel you forward, and just allow yourself to experience that sense of loss potentially even, but make sure that you recover quickly and don't let that get you down in the future, right? So that's super valuable. And I think as well, I just want to be super authentic as well and share that I recently went through quite a bad slump, right? And I guess I would even call it potentially a period of burnout. And what I realized that the cause of that was due to the idea that I lost my sense of purpose and I lost my own balance in the day-to-day hustle, right? So out of curiosity, I like to ask people that I talk to, what is your reason of getting out of the bed in the morning, and what's the purpose and, in a way, meaning of life? Just getting really spiritual and stuff like that.
Wow, what's the meaning of life? I think for me, it's leaving things better than I found them, in as many situations as possible. And there's not a whole lot more to it. I think the concept of immortality is the impact that one has had on those around them. It's not did they name a country after you or anything as crazy as that, but did you have a positive impact on those who you surrounded yourself with, so that you helped lift them up. And again, they help lift you up along the way as well. So, for me, it's what's the impact that I've had on my friends, my family? What's the impact that I've had on my team? Have I helped them to develop and, learn new skills and get better? What's the impact that I've had on the consumers of my business? So in my case, I'm really inspired by helping people save money and finding a way to make their life better. So it worked really well while I was at Walmart. The reason I joined Walmart, I don't know if I told you this story before, but I was doing my MBA. We just had my second child, and so I was busier than I've ever been in my entire life. Like literally, barely saw my wife, and we were living downtown. We had no car. There was no way we were going to be able to go grocery shopping. So we were using like a grocery delivery service. And at the time, this was like 2007, 2008, or maybe, sorry, a little bit after that. The service was not what we wanted. It was super expensive. And I was a student working full time. Like I didn't have any excess money. The online experience was abysmal. The delivery service was great. I'll give them credit for that. I'm not going to name any names. It's just not fair. It's years later, and I'm sure their service has evolved. But in any event, I hated it because I couldn't afford it, but I needed it. And I got to go to Walmart, and then I got to launch online grocery with Walmart and bring Walmart prices to people in that same situation. And I can just picture that like university student who's a parent, who's trying to work full time, who can't grocery shop and just needs that like couple of hours back in their day to make their family work, suddenly having access. And it just gets me out of bed every day to be able to do that. And now at Flipp, I get to do the same thing where I can envision that same person who's trying to decide, like, I only have this much to spend this week. How do I, make a great meal, put nutritious food on the table for my family? And they can use Flipp and they can make that happen. And it just brings a smile to my face to leave things better than I found them. So that's really what I look for.
That's super inspiring. And that sense of purpose really pushes you to work even harder potentially and just like really be fulfilled even while doing it, right? And I guess that really counteracts any of the setbacks or any of the unpleasant moments in like the different journeys, right? So on top of that, like how would you advise other people who may not have found that to like discover that and find their own purpose? And like when did it actually finally click for you? Because as much as we like to think that it comes out of like potentially thin air, or that we like pick it up like on the ground like a penny that we just found, I don't think it does, right? So what do you think around that?
I mean, I feel like everyone has something that they're passionate about, something that really resonates. And the more you can work towards being a part of what resonates with you versus just having a day job and then doing the thing that you love on the side, the closer you will be to having found your purpose. And I don't know if like saving people money is my one and only purpose. Again, making things better has really been the like overarching theme of what I've tried to do, and especially to digitize or bring like the advantages of technology to places where they didn't exist is truly what like I love to do. And so I've applied that in the case of helping people save money, because I feel like that really does resonate, because it was a point in my life where that was so necessary. But I think if you can just figure out like the core of what really motivates you, there's so many different ways to bring that to life. And honestly, you can find joy and find that core in so many different places. It doesn't have to be at Walmart or the biggest company in the world, where obviously you can have a big impact. But if you're just making life better for, 10 customers at a time, but that's enough to sustain you, there's nothing bad about that. It's an amazing opportunity. So the scale is almost irrelevant. You add a couple extra zeros after a number. It doesn't change the fact that you're making people's lives better.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's super inspiring. And I guess in a way, to wrap up, directly tying into that, what's some advice that you would give to your 16-year-old self even? And looking back, like what would you advise or even just make sure that you would be like, yo, young Rick, what should you pay attention to? And like, what should you keep in mind when you're moving forward, or like any situations that come to mind?
Yeah. Well, what's advice I would give to young Rick? It's a great question. I think like the most important lesson I think I needed to hear at that time, because keep in mind, like 16-year-old self, that's like mid high school, and for me, the way that high school progressed is I liked it less and less every year, and then I had an epiphany kind of in first, second year university, that you can actually find fun. You can like make anything that you're assigned fun if you do it for yourself, not because you're asked to. And I would love to have had that epiphany earlier, because I could have had a much more enjoyable kind of high school and then early university career. Because in university, I liked things more and more as things progressed, because I made them more and more for me. I took ownership of them, and then I found the fun inside of them and worried less about the grade or the mark or the number, and more around what I was getting out of it and how I could make it something that would last. And that was really impactful. And I think more people should look at it from that perspective. The grade is secondary. I know like you need a certain number to get into a certain school and like it matters, but I guarantee you, if you focus more on what you're going to get and how you're feeling, the numbers will dramatically improve because of that, not because you're trying to improve the number. So I would say just find the fun, make it for you, do the things that you're doing for yourself.
Absolutely. That's super inspiring. And it's something that we should make sure that we keep in mind as we do everything that we do. Because without the aspect of fulfillment and enjoyment in what we're doing, so there's always going to be things that we just don't enjoy doing. And if we can figure out some way to like spin it into a way that just feels fun and feels enjoyable in our own way, and turn it even maybe into a game, right? And that really is an amazing way to approach life. Now, let's get into the final bonus section of this podcast. So, Rick, what are some of your favorite book recommendations, and what are some other thought leaders that you look up to?
All right, I'm going to hit you with two books that I think you should read. The first one is Inspired by Marty Kagan. It is basically your product manager's handbook, and is absolutely worth picking up. I believe every word in that book, and I live by it. So by all means, pick it up. And then the second book I'll recommend is Made to Stick. It's a little bit of an older book. It's been around for a number of years, but it's about the power of telling stories that will stick with people, and why that's so powerful. And if I already said communication is the number one skill you've got to develop, that book was really impactful for me in my early career in learning how to be a better communicator.
Awesome. That's great. And what does your morning and night routine look like, actually?
Morning routine. It's dictated by what the kids are up to at that particular time. So a lot of getting people dressed and helping people with breakfast. But the bulk of my morning routine is really around, catching up on the most urgent things. So immediately wake up, immediately check Slack to make sure nothing's on fire, and how the team is doing. Then, get out, get ready myself. So I try and get up between 6:30, 7 most days. Have a light breakfast, as light as possible, because nothing's worse than already feeling weighed down early in the day. And then, getting on with it. The evening routine is probably more interesting. It's a whole lot of putting kids to sleep, spending time with my wife. We definitely try and spend at least like half an hour just catching up at the end of every day to make sure that we're on the same page and we genuinely like each other. So it's a good chance to hang out with a friend. And then, of course, catching up on the news of the day. So trying to consume as much news as possible before falling asleep around, if I'm honest with you, 12:30, 1 o'clock, and then do it all again.
Sounds great. And what are some of the tools that you use to get things done, and how do you optimize for being the most productive?
What are the tools to get things done? I mean, I'm generally not a huge believer that the tool makes the difference, but how you use it. And so, I use a lot of calendar management. I use Slack. I use various communication forms. Those are the things that keep me the most productive. Not sure how else to answer that question. I think everyone's got their own kind of niche and figures out their way through it. I'm a big proponent of Slack. If I had to choose one, it would be that.
Awesome. Sounds great. And to wrap up, where can people actually find you online, or how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is best and pretty easy to find. The only tricky part is my last name. So it's Rick Neuman, but Newman with a U, not a W. And if you can get past that one little hurdle, you should be able to find me just fine.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Rick, for coming on the show. And this was a great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode on the Masters of Today and Tomorrow podcast. At the end of the day, without all of you listening in, there would be no show. And I really, really appreciate it. Since you stuck to the very end, I just have 3 more things that you might actually be interested in. First of all, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you go on to Apple Podcasts and leave a comment or review directly with your thoughts to let me know what you're thinking. Next, if you know anyone else that might benefit from the show, shoot them a message and share this episode with them. Feel free to also comment or post your top key takeaways on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter with the hashtag MasterInTheMaking. And lastly, for access to all the links, episodes, and additional show notes, make sure you visit our website at www.mtt.world. We might also have some additional goodies there as well, so I'll see you there. Until next time, stay safe and keep working on yourself to become one of the masters of tomorrow.